and enter your question there. We will try to get to as many of the questions posted during the session, but again, we have a large amount of items to cover. So if we don't get to your question, what we will do, we will catalog all the questions submitted and send out responses when we send the slides for the session. Okay? Anybody have any questions about how we're running this today before I get started? Great. So as I said, we had a large number of questions submitted to be addressed. We have 2 pages of questions that I kind of went through and grouped together for like questions, and we will start with them. So the first big question is when will the full transition occur? And first of all, we wanted just to say thank you and congratulations. We did it. September 9th, we went live. And when we went live with 4,291 approved studies coming over to BruinIRB. And you began on day 1 working on PARs and modifications and closures and continuing requests. You just jumped right in. And so we want to thank you for your support and for your willingness to move on and to help us get to the next step in our system. So what about when will we be fully transitioned? And our goal is to be fully transitioned within the first quarter of 2025, so in winter 2025. Ideally, we would love to be transitioned when we return from the holiday break. However, we understand that there's submissions in process that may need a few more weeks to finish up and webIRB before they can be migrated. So every week we will continue with the migration of webIRB submissions in progress. And then we will also be sending out notifications to items in webIRB that are currently in state pre-submission or withdrawn due to non-response to correspondence. So as you know, these items can still be submitted, and you'll have the ability to submit them until December 31st, 2024. At that point, they will be auto-archived, which means they will be closed and archived, and you will no longer have access to the submission. That means that if you ever want to reactivate that submission again, you're going to have to start all over in BruinIRB. So if you've been working on a submission in webIRB and you're taking your time with it because it's not a high priority, please be sure you have your material saved outside of webIRB, because if that submission is not submitted by December 31st, it will be auto-archived. Okay, this is just a graphic just to show you how we're doing on the migration, the weekly migrations. You can see from this graph that weekly migration is going well. We are migrating about 70 submissions that complete processing each week. We anticipate another 5 to 7 weeks to complete migration of all in-flight studies, which is much faster than we anticipated. And you can see up here the large number of items in pre-submission, but even that is coming down little by little each week, which is a good sign. So the first topic I want to address, because it is a hot topic, and this is the number one issue with the migration that we receive the most questions and the most complaints about. It's the agree to participate activity. People want to know why it was put into place, who has to complete it, and when does it have to be completed. So I'm just going to take some time to review some information that we presented in our prior workshop, just because there is so much confusion. So why? Both FDA and NIH guidance require that study investigators assess for any potential conflicts of interest among key personnel. The responsible principal investigators required to disclose any significant interest they have that could be related to the conducted research project, both for themselves and their individual key personnel. What's important is that in the past, this was done by the person completing submission, often a regulatory coordinator who doesn't have access to COI information, may not have that information. We often see amendments coming in once that information is discovered after a study is approved. So there's not a lot of coordination or sharing of information, which is understandable. This is private information. So the agree to participate activity allows each individual key personnel to indicate whether or not they may have a financial interest that could be related to the project being conducted. The second key thing that the agree to participant activity does, it allows all key listed personnel that they have, let them know that they're listed on a research study. We've had several instances, usually unfortunately related to a compliance concern, where people are saying, I didn't even know I was listed. I'm not involved with this study. I don't want to be associated with this situation. And so again, it's a way to confirm that people understand that they've been given responsibility to support a study. It's noted what role they're expected to play, and they're able to agree or reject that role. So who has to complete this agree to participate activity? And it's each key personnel listed under item 1.0 on the local UCLA study team members page. Now, I understand in the initial announcements about agree to participate, it referenced that only co-investigators, faculty sponsors, and the PI would have to do this. That was an error. And it's anyone listed under item 1.0, and that announcement has been updated and corrected to reflect that any person here who's listed under item 1.0 must complete the agree to participate. So when in the process, so every new study submission will require the agreement of each study team member listed under item 1.0 before the PI may submit the protocol. Agree to participate advises the study team members to review and accept their proposed involvement, disclose any potential conflicts of interest. Agreement must be received from each listed study team member before the PI may submit. And so I just want to just show you, so again, here's item 1.0, and anyone listed here would have to do the agree to participate. They receive an email notification letting them know that their sign off is required. There's a link, a hyperlink to the study workspace. And if they click on this link, it'll take them into the study workspace, and the agree to participate button is on the left-hand side in the border. We have received feedback, oh, why can't it take them into the activity? And so they just have to click OK, and they don't have to click on agree to participate. Unfortunately, that's a step that's not supported in our application, but by clicking and getting into the study workspace, the activity button is very visible there. Clicking on that brings up this pop-up where, again, they agree to their role and responsibilities and their conflict of interest disclosure. If the faculty sponsor or study team member has a COI disclosure, the PI of the study is informed via email so that they're aware that somebody has a disclosure. And then that individual also receives a notice that they have to complete the financial interest disclosure form so that GAC can be uploaded to item 3.0 under local study documents, and that's available for CERC review. And so you can see here that CERC is also notified when there is a conflict, and they can conduct their review and request any additional information. All along this process, every team member's status on agree to participate is tracked in the system. We have an agree to participate tab that shows whether they've completed the requirement or whether it's still pending. And when everything is completed, you'll see that it'll indicate yes, and that the date it was completed is there, and the PI receives a notification saying you're good to go, your submission is ready to submit, go ahead. Now, we talk about that this has been the most debated and probably the hardest pill to swallow with BruinIRB deployment. And we really feel that this has to do with a huge bug at initial deployment. This bug did not properly grandfather in previously approved research team members. So when you went in and you were very dedicated and you created that first amendment to complete new and required questions in BruinIRB as part of your first required modification, everybody on your team received an agree to participate notification, even though they were previously approved and they had made those disclosures using our old process. So what should have happened is that they should have been grandfathered, and on this tab agree to participate, it should have showed that the requirement was complete, And the date that it was completed should be set to 1900 because they were grandfathered in. In this one, it shows that conflict of interest is pending, but that would also have been grandfathered in that case. Study team members who were not, the second issue is that study team members were not receiving email notifications. They weren't getting the notice, so you thought they were notified. They weren't receiving the notice. You're checking in with them, and they're saying, I've never gotten an email. I've never gotten an email. So we determined that this is because their contact information and profile in BruinIRB that's pulled from an HR system didn't have their current email address or their correct email address. So we developed this guide, how to update your contact information and profile in BruinIRB to make sure that everyone on your team is logging in, reviewing their email address, and updating it as necessary. And they can update that to their UCLA address, or if they prefer their Gmail address, whatever they'd like, they can update it there. So those are fields that they can able to update to get it to an email that they prefer. So we feel that these are the two major issues and why this has caused a lot of headaches. Yes, the bug was a big one, and unfortunately that happened when we went live. So that was your first taste of agree to participate, and we're sorry, but we think that that's been resolved. And then the updated emails should help with the notifications. If you still have questions about agree to participate, please be sure to check our guidance on the website. We have a step-by-step with pictures and what to do and who has to do what. And then, of course, we also have the video posted in our YouTube library that you can watch for additional instructions. The next question has to do with that first required amendment in BruinIRB. So as we explained during our initial trainings, because there's new and required questions in BruinIRB for which responses couldn't be migrated over from webIRB, you must complete an amendment before you can submit, use the edit study personnel activity or update study details activity, the administrative activities, or complete your first continuing review. So everyone has to do their first required amendment to address fields that couldn't be completed during migration. We have received a lot of feedback because if you had started a submission in BruinIRB before deployment, let's say you're working on a Reliant submission and you thought you were done, you were just waiting to upload the final consent form from the sponsor, and that was the last thing you had to do. And then you go in, you upload the consent form, you hit submit, and you receive all these error messages about questions that aren't answered. And you're like, what? I was finished. I just had to upload the consent form. Well, it's because once the new application was deployed, you also now have to address those new questions. So at your suggestion and at your request, we have created the migration updating BruinIRB after migration quick guide, which takes you through each section of the application and highlights the new and required questions that you have to complete. Keep in mind, some of these questions exist within pop-ups. So where you're adding a new funding source, there may be a required question there that wasn't able to be answered as part of the migration process, and you have to answer it. So this document really tries to highlight those pop-up questions and make it a little easier for you. So this has just posted yesterday to our website, and we hope that that helps with identifying those required questions. Another big request was just a general navigation help. Where can I find follow-on submissions? Where do I upload supporting documents? Where can I locate my approved study documents? So we have created a Navigating BruinIRB for Researchers quick guide, and this is just kind of a snapshot from that quick guide. You can see that things are numbered, and we explain to you how you can use that. What information you can find there. We identify all the tabs and what information is there. So we really hope this will be something useful for you that will help to address many of your questions about where you can find your approved documents. But of course, you do have, like in webIRB, a Documents tab where you can find your items currently approved in BruinIRB. And then under Snapshot, as you may know, that's where your snapshot of your last approved application in webIRB is, as well as the set of your last approved documents in webIRB are also under that snapshot. In terms of supporting documents, BruinIRB is a little bit different from webIRB because instead of uploading documents on different pages and different views, we have a page called local site documents. And this is where you upload your consent documents, recruitment documents, and then other attachments. Other attachments is a place for you to upload supporting materials for which there's no other place to place them in the application. So because this is a catch-all, it's important and required that you categorize what you're uploading. So you can see here under the category, you can upload a CERC letter, a COC letter, a drug brochure, device brochure, conflict of interest information, any information here that you want. And then, of course, there's an other section if you have a supporting document that's not listed. Lots of questions about tips for preparing amendments. Do you have to provide a summary? How do you work with those check boxes that don't always correspond to the modification that you're creating? So again, we created, to try and address all these questions, a quick guide, create and submit an amendment, CR or CRAM. This isn't currently posted on our website. We hope to have it available in the next week. We're just, it's in that queue to get posted. But these are the topics that it will cover. So how do you create a CRAM, a CR, or a modification, specific guidance for amendments, for continuing reviews, for closures, how do you withdraw or discard a submission, and how do you locate those follow-on submissions once they're created? This is just kind of a slide that explains the purpose of a modification and what you have to do. So each modification requires you to identify the scope of the modification, asks you to summarize the proposed edits, and then as a third step, will direct you to revise the approved application to reflect the proposed changes. So much simpler than in webIRB, you're not going to have to click into the approved study to make your edits. It leads you into a clone of the study that allows you to make the edits to correspond with the changes that you're making. So that's a huge improvement, and we've received really positive feedback on that part of the modification process. Now, in terms of amendment scope, this is something that can be frustrating and that you need to get used to. So you have to know when you start whether this will be both a continuing review and an amendment submission, which is allowed in the system, or whether it's simply a continuing review or simply an amendment submission. For anything where you're looking to modify your approved study through a modification, you have to define the scope. And the questions that are important here is study team member information or other parts of the study. If you have to make any update to study team member information, you need to check that box, or else you won't be taken to that page. If you check other parts of the study, you're going to go to every other page in the application other than local UCLA study team members. What's important to note, for your first amendment in BruinIRB, you must check study team member information and other parts of the study. You must do that. And the reason is that on the study team member page, you will be required to answer questions regarding the roles of each team member. Will they have access to PHI? Will they consent? Will they interact with subjects? And then do they have a conflict of, not the conflict of interest questions, but those questions about their roles with study subjects. So you must check that box in order for you to answer those required questions. What's happening is people are thinking, no, there's no changes in my study team members. They're not realizing that there's required questions on the local study team member page, so they don't check it. And then they're not able to submit their amendment because those required questions aren't answered. And unfortunately, you cannot come back afterwards and check study team member when you're like, oh no, I needed to add somebody or take somebody off. You would have to withdraw the amendment and discard the amendment, and start over. That's a frustrating thing. That's an application limitation, unfortunately, that we just don't have control over. So going back to the scope, you have these check boxes here, and we have a lot of feedback that these check boxes just really don't correspond. to many of the amendments that you're submitting. It's important to note that these checkboxes do not control the pages that open. We suggest that if you are feeling that your amendment doesn't really fall into any of these checkboxes, the catch-all or umbrella selection could be protocol changes, and that should be considered a catch-all for any updates that aren't specified, such as submitting a new device or drug brochure. This could also be used for adding new participating sites or changes to recruitment. It's important to know that details on the specific changes you're making will be included in response to the summary of the modification, which will be done on the next page of the amendment form. The summary of the modification is really the way that you tell the UCLA IRB what it is that you're doing, why you're making these changes, adding supporting documents to support those changes, and addressing possible requirements for reconsent or recontact of subjects. So this is a question we're talking about here. Oops, sorry. Question number 3, you want to state why these changes are being made, identify any new documents for which the review is requested, attach the sponsor's separate summary of changes under local site documents, and address whether it's necessary to inform currently enrolled subjects of the new information that's being proposed. So this is going to be where you support and justify your modification. So yes, this summary is required and it's very important. This is probably the most important element of your modification submission. The next question that was raised is, as you know, in BruinIRB, we no longer have a separate page for you to provide details on the process of informed consent and any plans to use short forms or remote consent. It's a very high-level summary of your submission. The details of that process are going to be in our wonderful protocol templates that are also available on our consent sites. We suggest that any details regarding use of remote consent, inclusion of non-English speakers, be outlined under the section Consent for Study Participation. You can document your plans to do remote consent by saying that you're going to obtain consent online. And then use of the short forms can be documented by selecting other, where it adds for other protections to be used during the study. And you can indicate in the consent process description that you intend to do remote consent and obtain consent from non-English speakers using short forms in the event that they are encountered. So we are directing you to that protocol template to offer that detail on your informed consent process. Okay. How to access and respond to IRB correspondence. So again, we have, in response to this question, we created and posted a new quick guide, how to respond to IRB requests. And it's a very detailed step-by-step guide with views of how you find your correspondence, how you make your edits, and how you submit that response for review. So we suggest that you review this quick guide in order to receive more detailed information on how to submit those responses. Now, the question was raised, can you notify, is there an activity to notify your PI when an application is ready for submission? So unlike webIRB, there's no separate activity ready to submit and that you would use to notify the investigator that a submission is ready for review and submission. In BruinIRB, we use the activity send inquiry requests to advise your PI or other team members that an application has been completed and is ready for review. And you actually can use this activity to speak not only to your PI and study team members, but to the IRB analysts by selecting IRB coordinator. So on this screen, this is how you would do it. You would send inquiry reply. It would pop open. There's a comment box where you can just put in, this is ready to submit. Thank you. And then under item 3, you would direct this notification to the PI proxy, and the primary contact. If you wanted to include a co-investigator, you could click on study team. And if you wanted to include the IRB analyst, if it's something that would impact the review process, you could check them as well. You don't have to, and we suggest you only do that if it's something regarding process or status that you're looking to communicate. Then the question became, so we have new study coordinators starting all the time. And they're being assigned to studies that were originally reviewed and approved in webIRB, and there's several amendments or continuing review reports, PARs, that they need to have access to. And I'm pretty sure you're not going to like the answer to this question. But basically, new staff added to your team cannot be granted access to the submission in webIRB. In preparation for taking webIRB offline, existing staff have been coached and told and asked to update their regulatory binders with the information that they need from webIRB and to keep those up to date. It's important that you understand that webIRB will not be around forever. It is a very fragile system, and we are being pushed on a daily basis to take it offline. It's taking a lot of IT resources to maintain. So we anticipate by the end of summer of 2025, webIRB will be completely offline. So it's very important that an approved staff member go in and download and save any regulatory materials as part of your regulatory binder, and that any new study staff member that needs access to that history have access to those regulatory binders, because webIRB is not staying. It won't be around forever. So this is another push, another reminder to update those regulatory binders. There's no functionality for a migrated study in webIRB. You can't edit study personnel. You can't edit guests. There's no way for us to add a new person onto that submission in webIRB. Anyone who's an approved study staff already on the study can access it, can download items, but a new person with no access who's not listed on the study cannot access it. We understand there's going to be always rare and extreme circumstances. Somebody leaves UCLA unexpectedly and everybody else on the team is no longer there. In those cases, of course, contact BruinIRB Help, and our office will do what we can to assist you. But we really, really cannot emphasize enough, webIRB is not going to be here much longer. And you need to prepare. If you need that documentation, it's not in your regulatory binder, that needs to be a priority in the next 6 months or so to get those items into your regulatory binder. The next question has to do with guest roles. What's the difference between guest roles and how they're managed, and other personnel collaborators who should be another personnel collaborator, and do they need to meet any requirements? So guest access allows an individual to view the submission but not edit it. Study team members who won't interact with human subjects or require access to PHI should be noted as a guest. This would include a regulatory coordinator, a fund manager, a statistician. These roles do feed to Encore. We have confirmed that the Encore feed is including these roles. I'm sorry, the transition on this slide. And they are there and are working. I'm so sorry, something's working with today. Other personnel should be used to identify non-UCLA personnel that are collaborating on the system, on the study. And they're either subject to their own IRB oversight, or they are going to rely on UCLA. If they're going to rely, they need to make sure they identify this as a multi-site study on the basic study information page so that we can track this as a situation where UCLA will serve as IRB of record. And then the last thing that we wanted just to share with you is that help is available. We're developing these quick guides and training videos driven by your feedback and requests for assistance. So if you're encountering a problem, or you have an issue or a suggestion, or you think a question could be better worded, please send those suggestions to bruinirb@research.ucla.edu. Tanya Edvilson is our staff member, and she is the one who works so hard on these quick guides and prioritizes the need, reports any issues, and helps to inform our IT team of what's working and what's not working and what things people are having problems with. And we post these and update the website very frequently, at least weekly. We're posting 4 or 5 new quick guides. And so it's all based on your assistance. In the same way, we develop teaching videos in order to help you and to have that access available to you when you need it. So I know I went through that very quickly. We will be sending these slides out to you, and the links are active in these slides so you have easy reference. The BruinIRB resource page has access to anything that I've discussed here, as well as to our YouTube teaching videos. But now I just wanted to give you a chance to hear your feedback and comments or additional questions that may have not been submitted at the time that you registered. So are there any questions or comments?
One just popped up. Let's
Mhm.
see here. Um, Thank you for the detailed info. Would you please kindly advise where to download the newly stamped ICF after a CR is approved? It's not under the document section.
Hmm. Okay, one second. Let me open my. It should be. Hang on a second. It is intended to be under the approved document section. You may not be looking, it's not under the continuing review, but it's going to be under the main study site. So hang on, I'm just trying to find a recent continuation that we can demonstrate that on. But it would be, you want to look under the documents under the main study for the most currently approved documents. One second. Okay. And of course, this one that I opened doesn't have it. So now, so this is probably a good thing to highlight for you. Let me share this. So here, this is a migrated study. And yes, you're absolutely correct that study approved documents are not posted here. That is why also you have to submit your first BruinIRB application. And the reason for that is once that amendment's approved, your IRB analyst is going to finalize what was approved in webIRB and allowed for use, as well as any new documents that you may have included in that submission. So if you go under the snapshot view, so for this study, okay, it's not moving. But under the snapshot, there's a section that says webIRB approved consent forms. That's what our study team uses to refinalize. So this study here that we're looking at, it doesn't have approved documents because that hasn't happened. So if you recently had a continuation approved in BruinIRB and your approved study documents aren't showing as in this study, so you can see here stamp finalized documents at time of migration, your analyst should have refinalized this consent for you. So I would contact your IRB analyst and see if they can please refinalize your continuation approval so that your approved document posts to the Documents tab. So we have to refinalize your documents in order for them to post here. So that may be a processing area. And this is just, it's a little bit different in how these things are handled in BruinIRB. So there's been several studies this week that we've been revising the approval and reissuing these documents because staff are also learning and this is handled differently in BruinIRB. So that may be the reason why you're not seeing that under these approved study tabs. Another question was from migrated studies, do we need to convert our protocols to the new protocol templates or only for amendments, complete the appropriate sections of the protocol template and leave the rest blank? So for migrated studies, we have developed some guidance on how you can use this approved study snapshot from webIRB to create a template, a protocol template, so you don't have to complete the whole protocol template. So no, you do not have to use a protocol template and recreate it. You can, sorry, this is really slow when it's displaying, but you can use your snapshot and we have you convert it into a Word document that then becomes editable and you can make any changes to that as necessary. So you have your snapshot here at the very top of the submission. And then on the BruinIRB library, there's instructions on how to convert your snapshot into a protocol that can be uploaded for your migrated study. And that hopefully saves you some time. We have had users who have followed the instructions and just based on their version of Adobe, it doesn't work for them. They get characters and a lot of images inserted into the document. If you find that happens with your version of Adobe, it might just be easier to populate the protocol template, but it's not required. Whatever works for you is easiest. We just need you to create that snapshot in a way that it's editable so that when there's amendments going forward, you can add additional information if necessary or change the responses. Then let's see. Okay, town hall. For certificate of confidentiality, yes, you would upload it to item number 3, local site documents. And that's the other attachments field. And then under category, there's actually a category for certificate of confidentiality. Now, what's important for you to note, if you have an NIH funded study, it is automatically assumed that you're issued a certificate of confidentiality, so you don't have to upload it. You would upload your certificate if the board required it above and beyond the NIH requirement. So if it's a non-NIH funded study, but the IRB thought that the data would be better protected with a certificate, so they direct you to go apply for a certificate separately, then you would upload it. For your NIH funded studies, because they're automatically generated with each proposal, we don't require you to upload it. Okay, I think those are all the questions. Any other questions? Just in terms of feedback that we received with registration, we want to thank you. You were all very kind in saying that you found our webinars and our quick guides very helpful. And we appreciate that, and that the IRB staff has been extremely helpful in addressing your questions and getting back to you. We want to extend our thanks to the IRB analysts. They, like you, are learning and working in 2 systems and adjusting to 2 different ways of doing things. And they deserve a round of applause. They've been great partners in this deployment. And you guys have been excellent partners in just getting information back to us, your feedback. You pose really great questions and help us rethink things. So please continue to do that. And again, we are open to your feedback, and we learn a lot from you. So even after this town hall, as we go along in the finalizing the full transition to BruinIRB, please use that BruinIRB email, bruinirb@research.ucla.edu, to forward suggestions, questions, or concerns, and we'll respond to you as soon as possible. So thank you very much. And if there's no other questions, I'll give you a few minutes of your time back. And it seems like this format worked to get some questions in advance, help us to prepare those questions, and rather than just doing hot questions online. So we'll keep that in mind going forward. And if you have other suggestions where these sessions could be more helpful, please let us know. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.